Fatal Inertia on the Xbox 360. It's yet another one of those weird Xbox 360 games I've never heard of, but I found in a bin for about $1. And while I wasn't really sure what to make of it when I first purchased it, what I got was a high-speed, arcadey, sci-fi kart racing type thing, and it's actually pretty good. The core concept of Fatal Inertia is you design your own craft out of like 5 archetype crafts. You go on tour with it, challenging various championships, and each championship has like 5 or so different contests within it, and then based on your overall combat score as well as your racing score, ends up delineating where you place in the overall championship, which in turn affects what you unlock to apply to customizing your vehicles so that you can go out, race better, and take home the gold more often. I quite like the self-serving nature of going out, doing well, taking your reward, and using it to allow you to go out and continue racing. It has a nice internal consistency with the rest of the gameplay and trying to encourage you to continue playing, as opposed to any number of other games where doing well will unlock something, but it's usually something that's completely either cosmetic or just a side grade of personal preference. The latter of which should probably not be placed as a unlockable based on how well you do. But regardless, it works well here. Now I think the first thing about the actual racing I should talk about is the combat. Essentially like any other kart racer, you would drive around the track, grab a pickup, and then utilize its ability to take out your opponent or boost your own standing depending on what it is. However, in this game, interestingly enough, each item has 2 uses, and it usually ends up either being one way or the other. For example, you can get a rocket, which if fired at your opponent will home in on them and pretty much force them to the dirt, slowing them down immeasurably. Or alternatively, you could use the rocket on yourself, which gives you a massive boost. And while this might be the single fastest boost in the game, you actually lose pretty much all control, so keep that in mind. But still, pretty much all the weapons in this game are kind of like that, where you can either apply them to yourself in a creative way to either boost your performance, or use them on your opponent to try and hinder them. And there's a fair number of different weapons. For example, there's a smoke screen which you can fire in front of you to hit your opponents, or behind you to take out people trailing you. There's stuff like magnets, which you will see a lot of, which stick themselves to your opponent and not only damage their ship, but weigh them down, which slows them down, which is kind of neat. There's mines, which you can either use to help take out your opponent, or use as a smaller, more controlled boost, and they are very useful in that regard. There's even like this weird bungee cable tether thing, which you can launch at your opponent to slingshot past them, or get them stuck to various bits of environment. Although, to be fair, I don't think I've ever actually managed to successfully use the thing. The weapons are relatively creative, and while there isn't a ton of variance with them, the way they can be utilized is rather creative, and I have to admit, I do appreciate their overall versatility. Now, on the other side of combat is, of course, having to defend yourself. If you get hit by a magnet, or a rocket, or one of those weird bungee cord things, which, why can't I use them, damn it? If hit by them, you can utilize an aileron roll to dislodge them from your ship. However, this is kind of a risk-reward thing, and I really appreciate this, because if you do this, you essentially lose all control of your ship for about 1 second. So timing this is absolutely critical, and the thing about magnets and rockets are, if you don't get rid of them immediately, they do more damage to you, and they can explode and do some serious damage to your hull, so you gotta kind of get rid of them as fast as possible. But if you're going into a turn, you're going to crash and you're basically going to take damage anyway. Basically, you kind of have to, on the fly, measure out, okay, can I afford to lose all control for 1 second? If check yes, I'll roll and I'll be perfectly fine. If no, well, I'm either going to have to roll and try and manage to get around that turn, or I'm going to crash and take a lot of damage anyway. It creates a lot of strategy around the driving and how you navigate the course, and I absolutely think that's brilliant. Now, speaking of rolling your ship, this actually ends up falling into both a problem of the game, and also something about it that's kind of great as well. On the plus side, this game utilizes your ship's shape and its aerodynamicness and its overall profile quite excellently. For example, if you take a lot of damage and your wings suddenly get bent, well, they don't provide as much downward force on your ship, and suddenly it's a lot harder to turn and you're kind of swerving all over the track. You lose a lot of control when your wings get dented up. I really do appreciate that damage to your ship is something tangible. Not only does it mean that if you take too much damage, you get destroyed and you're knocked out of the race, but it means even the smallest ding can drastically affect the performance of your ship, and you have to find a way to compensate for it, even if there really isn't a way based on your ship's design. That's really cool. Unfortunately, this also leads to a bad thing, which is your ship's overall shape and profile can mean it gets caught up on bits of environment that it really shouldn't have. It feels like your hitbox and your overall shape of your ship is actually bigger than it looks like, and when you do that spinning maneuver, there's a good chance you're actually going to ding both your wings on the ground at the same time, which is kind of awful, and that actually makes things a lot harder than it needs to be. So you kind of take the good with the bad here, but there's a lot of, I don't want to say innovation, but there's a lot of really neat concepts at work here that I haven't seen too many other places. Now, as I mentioned, there is some vehicle customization. You can pick one of like 5 different ship shapes, and that's about it, at least at the start. But once you start beating races, you'll unlock new wing types, which will moderately affect your performance, but they will also change the overall shape and profile of your ship, which again could mean you get hit by things. So you gotta kind of calculate that as well, which kind of makes designing your ship a more cerebral process. One weird thing about it though is you also have to unlock stickers and some paint schemes, which seems really pointless. Like, I'm not saying it's bad that they're there, but making them unlockables just seems like it's something there without meaning, you know? But overall, well, I think that you have to end up putting a lot more work into customizing your ship than should be required, especially very early on. It is appreciated. Now, the last thing I need to say about gameplay in Fatal Inertia is the tracks. While there are a fair number of tracks, they fall into, like, similarly to the ship, one of 5, like, archetypes. You're either racing in the snow, a volcano, islands in the Caribbean, or like a canyon out in the middle of nowhere. And while there are a lot of different variations of this, they all use the same theme. Oh, and the jungle. Almost forgot the jungle. And the thing is, while they do essentially cover the spectrum of sci-fi environments in the broadest sense, it feels like there could have been more. And it doesn't help that a lot of the tracks are actually really very small, which means that you're probably going to be going through these races at least moderately quickly, and you're going to be seeing the same environments over and over, which compounds the problem quite rapidly. Overall though, I would say the gameplay to Fatal Inertia is pretty well done. It does have a few hiccups here and there, but overall the gameplay is fun, the racing is enjoyable, and there's enough different race types, from combat elimination to like using nothing but magnets to score the highest combat bonus to using bombs to boost as fast as possible. There's enough different race types to keep it fresh and enjoyable. The overall presentation for Fatal Inertia is solid. The game looks okay, although once again it does repeat environments ad nauseum, and with like 5 different ship types, you're probably not going to be too surprised at what your opponents are flying. But I do appreciate the sense of speed this game gives you, because in some cases you are going insanely fast, especially with boosts and stuff active. Audio-wise, this game is not really all that special. The soundtrack works for what it needs to do, but it's not notable whatsoever. Overall, it works for what it needs to do, just don't go into this with high expectations. Which is really a good way to summarize this game. I mean, I found this game in a bargain bin for $1, and for $1, this game's actually pretty solid. I wouldn't say it's the best racing game I've ever played. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's the best racing game I've played on the Xbox 360, but it is enjoyable, and it not only is it enjoyable, it's probably the most enjoyable game I've ever played from Koei Canada, which is apparently a thing, but you know what? Fatal Inertia, for a couple bucks, yeah, it's not too bad.